and you're welcome. This is Fintan Dunn on the 14th of June 2022 with an update for you Betfair Trump punters. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. Well, for a start, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for a careful, considered analysis of our legal chances of getting justice against Betfair, considering that the independent betting adjudication service let us down so badly with their ruling in 2021. And also, the delay is not because of revenge and cold plates. The delay in taking action is because of prejudice. One of the reasons why that ruling from IBAS, which was so flagrantly ignored the realities of what had been reported by so many customers, right? One of the reasons is prejudice against Trump punters, and especially in the wake of the election having been lost by Trump, a whole wall of prejudice is there, particularly in legal and administrative circles in the United Kingdom, and that's just the reality. Had it been a bunch of Biden left-wing liberal supporters clamouring for their rights, maybe the entire thing would have been treated differently. Of course it would. And I'm going to cite here somebody, Alexander Mercouris, who is a member of the team at the Duran, D-U-R-A-N. You can Google that or go on YouTube and type that in. You'll find their channel. He's won along with Alex Christoforou. And Alexander Mercouris has worked in the High Court in London. And I've listened carefully to his and other soundings I've taken about the legal situation in London and about our chances of getting a fair hearing there. To give you an idea, Alexander has warned that in cases like, for example, Julian Assange, and in cases like the Skripal poisoning case, there is no legal justice operational. Pure facade operational. He points out that in, for example, the case of Russian individuals looking for legal counsel to represent them, word has gone around the law library and London High Court circles and legal circles that anybody who wants to come forward and represent Russians, well, it's not going to go well for them. Can you imagine that? Lawyers being intimidated out of going looking for representation and securing representation for Russians? So those are the scale now. Alexander has worked in the courts securing legal representation for individuals in criminal cases. So he's deeply aware of those levels of prejudice. And it is for that reason that I've been hesitant to come forward with any proceedings which just might run into a wall of legal prejudice and fail by being brought too early when the emotions were too high. Emotions have faded now, haven't they? And furthermore, the January 6th thing reenactment is now out of the way. And from now on, there is going to be nothing but, say from November of this year onwards, nothing but positive news in terms of the overall truth coming out about the election. Now, that's not what we're litigating about, is the truth of the election, but it's a context. And so that context is going to be shifting in our favour from now on. And by the time any case now that we initiate now gets to the courts, then I think that will be a favourable environment where we have a chance with a good case of getting a fair judgment. So what do we do? How do we move forward from now? What's the game plan? Well, the game plan in brief is as follows. We spend a small amount of money to find out if we have a legally arguable case. That's what we do. And if it looks like we have a legally arguable case, by spending a small amount of money, then we spend another bit of money further on to see if we can take that legally arguable case forward. And then, if we reach a point further on, we may decide to go into court. So we're a long way away from that point right now. Right now, what we need to find out is how many people who put on large sums of money are prepared to fork up a small amount of money now to find out, stage one, do we have a case? That would require us to engage a legal firm and to seek a legal counsel's opinion. I'll lay out the basis of the opinion. It's very simple, our case. It's straightforward, our case, I believe. So, let's say we had 100 people, at minimum, who had put on a large amount. Let's say 10,000. I'm making average figures here now. If we had 100 people who each put on 10,000, and if those 100 people each put in 50, well, there'd be a fighting fund of 5,000 sterling. They're ready to find out, have we got a case? And the upfront cost for those 100. Now, if it was more than 100, the upfront cost could be lower. We'll see how this might structure. Those are the costs we're talking about to find out, have we got a case? Now, the meaning of have we got a case is as follows. Have we got a case that we can insure against our legal costs? We don't want to go into the High Court naked without any limit on the costs that we might incur. And usually how you hedge against that potential is you have a legal opinion on your case, and that legal opinion is strongly supportive of the possibility that you may succeed. But even more important, of course, is its assessment of whether or not you're going to get your legal costs. That's the most important thing in order to secure insurance and in order to actually have a chance then of taking the case forward in the High Court in London. So job one is getting a legal opinion which is strong. And I believe the strongest legal opinion and the broadestly applicable legal opinion will be achieved by focusing on our rights as consumers, under general consumer rights legislation, which puts an onus for transparency and accuracy of terms on the provider. And if there are failings as a result of negligence on their part, then they're liable. That's the basis we will be seeking to see if such a case could be argued and if our circumstances would apply. So now I'm going to just very briefly take you through the case that we would be making. Let's just take a look at the key issues here. The key issues here all revolve around this simple question: the description of the bet in 2020 and its description in 2024. Now, in 2020, the bet was described as a next president bet. And in 2024, the bet was described as election winner. In 2020, what we bet on was the following question: who will be elected to be the next president of the United States of America as a result of the 2020 presidential election? That's pretty clear. It's pretty unambiguous as far as I'm concerned. It's a bet on an outcome of an election. You see what it says? It says who will be elected president as a result of the 2020 presidential election. Now notice by comparison the bet question in 2024. Which candidate will win the 2024 US presidential election is the question that you will be offered to bet on today on Betfair's website. So on Betfair's website there's a whole new game in town. You ain't betting on next president anymore, you're betting on which candidate will win. Notice that we're talking about candidate here now. Which candidate will win an election, not who will be elected next president. You see, you may have watched 1 or 2 election counts in your lifetime. Have you? You know, those late night counts. It gets to 11, 1 a.m. in the morning. And eventually the WHO returning officer comes out and announces the result of the Tetherington Northwest by-election. And the votes in total were such, and spoiled votes were such, and total valid poll was such, and the votes allocated to each person were alphabetically as forward: Andrews, Peter, 2,461, Smith, John, 6, etc. That role was performed by the President of the US Senate on the night of the 6th, 7th of January, 2021. He was the returning officer, and he read out the tally of votes which have been accepted by the Senate. No earlier could you determine the result of that election. And so at heart, we're saying we demand fairness under the 2015 UK Consumer Rights Act, for example. We claimed in our IBAS filing the right to resolve inconsistencies, contradictions and flaws in the market rules by means of plausible interpretation to our benefit. In other words, that the plain language meaning of the bet was what should have applied. If it was plain language for an ex-president, then you shouldn't have to read the small print to find out that it might be actually different in the small print. We're relying on consumers' rights, not the specific 2015 UK Consumer Rights Act legally. We'll see it's very complex law, but let me just take you very briefly through it. For example, here in the notes of the 2015 Act, section 69, we have contract terms that have different meanings. And 321, note 321 says contract terms can be ambiguous and capable of being interpreted in different ways, especially if they're not in writing or in accessible format. In these cases, this section ensures that the interpretation that is most beneficial to the consumer rather than the trader is the interpretation that is used. So that's an example of how the onus is put on the trader to make sure that anything that might be ambiguous or capable of being interpreted in different ways has to be resolved by them. Otherwise, there's potentially negligence on their part. And these terms in general have been the subject of European law and UK law, and it's very complex, but in general, the terms apply on subject matter and price, which is what we're talking about here, are only exempt if transparent and prominent. I don't think they were transparent and prominent enough, the terms that they tried to insert into these contracts. And there's the actual section itself, section 69. If a term in a consumer contract or a consumer notice, which is what we had, could have different meanings, the meaning that's most favourable to the consumer is to prevail. So we're relying on that general body of law which is aimed to support the rights of consumers to fairly know what they're getting into when they're getting into it. Would you agree that's fair? We think so. And that's where we would be asking a court to favour us. And that's what we'd be asking a senior counsel for a legal opinion on, is that regardless of what award might be made our direction by any court, is a court likely to agree that on the basic question of whether Betfair had a responsibility to discharge similar to what is expressed here in section 69 of the 2015 Act, did they, and if so, if they were negligent, are they liable? If they're liable, our costs are secure. If it's an open question as to whether liability attaches, then that's different. So you see what I mean? If we qualify under a body of existing legal rulings, then we're likely to be able to go forward. So they also had that responsibility as things progressed. As you know, you see here with the graph of the price as money came into this market over time, that not only did they have a responsibility to people who put on bets before the election took place, but people who were placing bets on subsequently, the terms and conditions under which those bets were accepted. There was a special responsibility on Betfair there, considering that the election had already taken place, to be very clear as to what was about to happen, what terms, what rules applied, what protocols or procedures would play out when new entrants were coming in with money seeking to put it on. And they did not discharge that responsibility. In fact, their terms and conditions were so vaguely constructed that they could have closed that market on the night of the election, on the night of the 14th of December, or on the 6th, 7th of January, at their own discretion. Because the terms were so vague, they allowed them to close on all those different dates. Now, the date we figured from those terms was that they were going to wait, as they said in the terms, in accordance with the 12th Amendment of the US Constitution. And that governs the entire electoral process, including the fact that the returning officer in this election is the President of the US Senate. So, we say, if we're entitled to take the meaning that is most beneficial to us, we'll take that meaning, thank you, because that's the clear implication of a bet on next president, is that you have to wait until the next president actually happens, including all legal challenges, including all protests, including all Senate objections, as the tally is prepared for the calculation of the total and the final declaration by the President of the Senate. So, very simple issues at law there, and relatively easy to evaluate. And that's the basis that we'll be going forward on, is to see if this is a valid basis for us to make a claim that the meaning that's most favourable to us must prevail. So what do you do now? Well, for a start, there's the link to the Telegram group where we can discuss these issues, and suggest that you join that group for starters. And right now, there is nothing to do except to consider, I've just said, consider this matter, and then in the next 48 hours, or maybe a little longer, I will email out the people who had the most at stake, the top, say, 400 or 500 people, in terms of having had the most at stake of their money that they put on with Betfair. That's a sensible way of approaching it, because we need a spearhead here. And clearly, the best way to have a spearhead is with those who had the most at stake, who did lose the most, and who have the most need for justice. So I'll be, in that email, I'll be asking them to respond back to me if they're open to considering that they might take the first step along with others. We'll see how many, and then we can decide whether we're moving forward or not. But that will be the first question, to see if we're ready to find out if we have a case, spend that initial sum, get ourselves something like a few thousand sterling fund to find out, are they prepared to consider that? You don't have to hand over any money yet. Nobody's handing money over anywhere yet. We just find out what the interest level is. And you'll get an email if you're among those who have had a large sum at stake. You'll get an email from me, and then you can reply or not. If you don't want to go forward with this, if you're prepared to just leave it as it is, then do so by all means. But if you feel, yeah, look, if it involves spending that amount of money, that's something I'm prepared to look at, Let me hear more. Let me hear your specific proposals on that as to how it will play out and what sum and when and what subsequent sum and when and how. Yeah, I'll take a look at it and I'll see. That's what I'll be asking you. And then obviously when we see how many are involved, we get an idea of what the funds required would be to move this thing forward. Then I can email out again, and then I can let the overall group know as to how many of those with a lot at stake have decided that, yeah, they're prepared to look at this further. And we'll just update everybody as we go. That group on Telegram is a private group, which should be a bit better than the Telegram. Unfortunately, have not stamped down on spam. It's a bad problem on spam, but a private group should offer us a bit better protection against that. And that link will expire on the solstice, 21st of June. So if you're joining the group, make sure you click that link and follow on to the group before then, because the link will expire then. All right, that's it for an update. I've laid it out. I hope you will consider it. I'm certainly in. I'm ready to have a little bit look further. And if you are also, look out for that email from me in a few days, and then respond to me and let me know if you're interested in just seeing how far we can go with this. All right, that's it for this edition. I'll be back with more, of course, on my regular stuff on the channel, and I hope you join me for that also. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunn. See you soon. Thanks.